You are listening to Talking Star Wars. Welcome back, Star Wars fans. I am Connor.
And I'm Alex.
We're going to talk about Star Wars.
As we normally do.
It's the first installment in Missed Opportunities. And in the new canon of Star Wars, and in all Star Wars, there are just things that presented itself with a glimmer of hope and interest, and then for whatever reason, it failed to meet the expectations it set up for itself.
Yeah.
Like the character we will talk about today, Captain Phasma.
I'm usually more of a, how can I find the good things in this and make it hang together? Connor's a little more critical than me, but even I can take a critical eye to Star Wars media, and there's some that is either all terrible, or more often there are things where there's some good ideas and some good scenes, but the whole thing just does not hang together.
I'm pretty sure the holiday special is canon.
The holiday special is not canon.
I'm pretty sure Life Day is a thing in actual new canon.
Well, yes, things that are in the holiday special are canon, but the holiday special is not. But
it's like the ship of whatever it's called from Vision. How many pieces can they pull from the Star Wars holiday special before it's all canon?
That's fair. The ship of Theseus becomes the Star Wars. But then there's also, I've read some really bad Star Wars media. I'm just working my way through the whole expanded universe. By far, the worst was a YA series called Join the Resistance, which the rest of the YA for Star Wars is actually fairly good. That should be burned into fire.
I can get into the YA Legends books, The Glove of Vader, Triclops, son of the Emperor.
I'm always offended by how little trust some YA fiction has in YA readers. I mean, even a 6-year-old can understand things that some fiction dances around. But today we're not talking about just missed opportunities in general. We're talking about a topic near and dear to Connor's heart.
So the sequel trilogy in entirety. It kind of, in my, everyone has an opinion. Everyone has their own different level of Star Wars fandom. Mine falls off right after The Last Jedi, just because it felt like The Rise of Skywalker tried to course correct every perceived flaw of the previous two movies. And two characters that don't get served successfully are Captain Phasma and Finn, because there's a clear dynamic set up between the two in The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi that is just dropped and left uncompleted. There's a rule of threes in any kind of in comedy and drama. You have in your acts. We need to see some conclusion to this fallen stormtrooper and the commanding officer that drove him to it. So I know you know a lot more about the history of Phasma and the fuller scope of her character outside, and I don't want to be contrarian to anything that's outside of like a quality established work of canon. So what is Phasma's being? What is her identity outside of these films where she's a cardboard cutout, a chromed cardboard cutout?
Yeah. So just before we go on, we can't talk about everything that we'd like to change or that we would critique in the sequel trilogy today. And of course, there are things to critique in the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy as well.
Really?
I mean, have you seen the prequel meme subreddit?
Really?
Connor? Yeah. But today we're specifically going to focus on the character progression of Finn and Captain Phasma as seen in episodes 7, 8, and 9, and in the supporting fiction that was released about them. Mm-hmm. So to give the backstory that is present, there was one novella released about Finn, and then one complete novel and one graphic novel released about Phasma. The one about Finn was fairly straightforward. It just established that he is at the top of his stormtrooper class. He's gone through the standard indoctrination classes and procedures operated by the First Order, which we get
on their child soldiers, yes.
Yeah, recruited child soldiers that are indoctrinated from a young age through a program set up by someone called Cardinal, and then passed over to Phasma to complete their training. And when they're young in their formative years, they have propaganda, mind, subliminal messaging that's relayed in their mind through night, and it's military discipline. So Finn is at the top of his class, FN 2187, and just known by that at that point, excels in everything, but he can't quite bring himself to actually kill people. In any simulation, he always comes out on top, but then in his first real mission, he blows it. And Phasma suspects that the problem is that he doesn't actually have his heart in this. And so gives him one final chance after he
Is this where he's demoted to sanitation?
Yes, demoted to sanitation for a while, but then is given one final chance on the mission to go retrieve Luke Skywalker, because Phasma needs the best stormtrooper she has, and FN2187 is still, by the numbers, one of the best people she has. That's Finn's backstory. It's pretty straightforward. I mean, Finn is deliberately a bit of a backslide, has to figure out who he is as a person.
Right. And through the films, just he has the beginning of a narrative where he needs to learn to care for someone who isn't him, and he learns to care for Rey. And that's, takes place in The Force Awakens, and then in The Last Jedi, he learns to take on a cause, the cause of the Resistance, and that movie's about him learning that sometimes you have to put up a fight and you can't just run away from conflict.
Which is sort of like the character development we wish that Bendu would have, if you want to see our previous episode talking about how sometimes, aggressive neutrality is a choice in and of itself and has its own pros and cons. Mm-hmm. But going into the backstory of Phasma, so they released an extensive novel and a graphic novel about Phasma's backstory and activities between The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, which are actually some of the best work in a background character that I've read in Star Wars. Phasma was a warlord on a dying planet in the Outer Rim, or the Unknown Regions. She doesn't exactly know where it was. So she's one of the warlords of her tribe, and the planet has been dying after a terrible terraforming accident. Implied that it happened either during the Empire or the Republic, and that the planet's just been abandoned and all the people there are slowly dying. She becomes leader of her tribe, and we learn through the course of the novel, which is never told through Phasma's perspective. It is always told through the people around her. We never see things directly through Phasma's eyes. It's always how other people perceive her, because Phasma is very careful not to let anyone see who she really is. Mm-hmm. And so the novel is kicked off when she's leader of this warlord tribe, and she's been pushing the leader of her tribe to be more aggressive with a neighboring tribe, when Brendel Hux, the father of the General Hux that becomes the leader, the second in command to Snoke, and helps finish the super laser, what's it called again?
Starkiller Base.
Starkiller Base.
Yeah.
Yep, Armitage Hux. And of course then his father, Brendel Hux. He was leader of a military academy on the planet of Arcanus, which is mentioned in the Servants of the Empire series, as well as the Aftermath Trilogy in the new expanded universe.
He's actually a character that dates all the way back from the Empire. He's one of the few characters that Palpatine specifically recruits to go into the Unknown Regions and establish the First Order. He was leader of a military academy, featured one of the military academies, and so he pioneers the indoctrination and reprogramming methods for young cadets and children, and so he's recruited. His ship is shot down by the same automated defense platforms that shoots down everyone who tries to leave this dying planet, which was implied to maybe be a quarantine method, or everyone just forgot how to turn off all the planetary defense cannons because everyone died. So Brendel Hux lands. Phasma is fascinated by his technology, because, they're to the point of this planet where they're using bladed weapons and wearing wooden armor and things like that, and they have small caches of barely functioning technology. And it's their brutal slog across this planet, getting involved in local squabbles, their group dwindling, Phasma making choices that kills more people and seizes more power. And at the end, when she finally betrays everyone else and joins the First Order, and then it's implied she helps... what's his name?
Armitage.
So he helped, and then at the end, she helps Armitage Hux kill Brendel Hux so that he can become second in command of the First Order. And so it's always implied she's doing it for herself, for her own power. She has no inherent loyalty to the First Order, and even Brendel Hux, who saved her, she kills him when she has the opportunity to enhance her own position and have Armitage Hux owe her a favor. Mm-hmm. And then, so we already established Phasma not as this loyal soldier who suddenly emerged from their indoctrination program as this perfect soldier. She's on all their posters, she's on all their recruitment things. She's actually a former despot, betrayer, warlord who killed all of her own people for the chance to escape.
And then, of course, Cardinal, her compatriot, discovers her secret's history and confronts her, and she attempts to kill him too.
Which is kind of like Thrawn, in a way, where Palpatine went and found Thrawn from the Unknown Regions, and he was pre-established in his own...
In the new canon, Thrawn deliberately lets himself get captured. But then Thrawn recognizes who he is. Or Palpatine recognizes Thrawn's importance. Mm. So then the other part, I'd recommend you read that book, Phasma, because it's also a nice depiction it's a post-apocalyptic Star Wars story. It's this people have cobbled together technology. It's brutal. People lose limbs. They die of disease. The main viewpoint character for most of it is a pregnant woman who's in love with a man. So you get more of like this earthly life than you do in most Star Wars fiction.
And then there's Phasma, who, oh no, she's betraying everyone as she goes.
And as you know, what seemed to be incongruous to people, because Phasma is presented in The Force Awakens as like this loyal soldier. She questions FN2187's loyalty. She's implicitly trusted by Armitage Hux to go and retrieve the information on Luke Skywalker.
Trusted by Kylo to an extent as a commanding officer.
But then she's threatened very briefly, and I think she honestly believes that when she's captured by Finn and Han Solo, I think she honestly believes that Han Solo and Finn will kill her if she does not lower the gate. And I'm not sure if Finn could have gone through with it, but Han Solo definitely would have just shot her.
Oh, yeah. You know how many stormtroopers Han Solo has killed?
Yeah.
It's another episode murder in the Star Wars universe.
And the thing is, Phasma was not willing to take that chance. Maybe they wouldn't have killed her, but maybe they did. And so Phasma does what Phasma does best. She looks out for Phasma. So she gives up the codes immediately on the thought that she's caught in a position she's not strong in. They throw in the trash compactor. And then the graphic novel picks up, during the destruction of Starkiller Base, she breaks out of the trash compactor. And then her first thought is, I need to cover my tracks. I cannot have them discover that it was my codes that were used to lower the shield. So she goes to the terminal, she erases the data, but then she sees if anyone else has accessed the data. It turns out to be a tech who was sent by Armitage to figure out who the fuck lowered our shields and is letting them destroy my precious Starkiller Base. And so she implicates that person as the person who lowered the shields, says she'll be in pursuit, commandeers a TIE fighter with a pilot, pursues this person, they crash on an uncharted world. She incites a civil war between factions on that world. And again, you never are in Phasma's head, except for a couple of brief moments. Mostly you're in the head of the pilot then, as soon as she lands on the planet.
It's so cool.
Yeah, there's brief moments where it switches to Phasma's perspective. Most of the time you see Phasma through the eyes of other people, and it's not a great sight. So she murders the person who discovered she was the person who lowered the shield. And then the TIE fighter pilot, who has by now figured out why they're there, promises her silence, and Phasma won't allow any loose ends that kills them too, and then leaves the civil war that she incited to rage on to cover her tracks, and goes back and takes credit for having eliminated the mole to Armitage Hux and is lauded for it. So it's this fascinating character who has, and I think it speaks to how also a fascist organization functions that values strength so much, in that she has all the outward displays of loyalty and strength, but her primary concern is maintaining her own power base within it. And she eliminates all records that she can find. Oh, and a cute trivia piece is that Brendel Hux used Padme Amidala's old yacht as a status symbol as his ship, and that is what Phasma's armor is made out of.
Oh, cool.
So she went back to the planet after where Brendel Hux's ship was shot down and made armor out of it, as like the only thing she'd take back from that, and to make a point that she was special. So let's take this character who I just sketched out, this ex-post-apocalyptic warlord who betrays her own people, finds the strongest organization she can that pulls her out of this dying situation, kills the hand that feeds her because Brendel Hux knows where she came from and knows her true story, so she leaves no one alive who knows who she really is. In contrast to the depiction we get in the movie,
where she's very much, it's the Boba Fett problem, where if you look at the original trilogy of Star Wars films, Boba Fett is more than the sum of his parts, because in The Empire Strikes Back, very chilling, very cool, but then in Return of the Jedi, he is knocked out of the game very comically.
Ignominiously, you might say.
Yes. He it's not the Wilhelm scream, but it's close enough when he gets hit in the backpack and goes flying into the Starlight Pit. So
you get this character in The Force Awakens who's played by Gwendolyn Christie, who's amazing. Has this, it's almost like a proto-Mandalorian in this cool armor. She never takes the helmet off.
It's very striking presence as chrome-plated trooper general.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Part of the backstory is that people wear masks on her planet, and she never takes it off. And then she takes on stormtrooper armor, and she never takes the helmet off. And so only one person ever sees her actual face, and that's the person the person who discovers that she's not actually loyal to the First Order before she leaves him for dead.
And that makes the moment in The Last Jedi all the more important when Finn he busts her helmet open and sees a sliver of her eye, sees the humanity beneath there.
But of course, that's not set up well at all, which I think you're about to get into.
I was going to ask, we see what her character amounts to in The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. You can count the number of minutes that she's on screen for, and you can probably count it on one hand. So you have a character who, much like Boba Fett, has this striking visual presence, who, very different visual elements, but Star Wars is all about design. Star Wars is all about the character coming through the design. So Darth Vader is an evil rogue samurai, wizard, villain, Nazi. And so he looks like all of those things amalgamized.
Yeah, and the fact that he treats Boba Fett with a modicum of respect says a lot about Boba Fett's character.
Yeah, same between the triumvirate between Hux, Phasma, and Kylo Ren.
But we don't ever see Kylo Ren really directly interact with Phasma.
No.
In the same way that Vader interacts with Boba Fett to lend him
It's
some...
much more casual.
Yeah, because she's almost isolated from everyone else in the movie. She is her own power base. We don't see her directly interact with Kylo Ren. She has like 2 lines that she shares with Armitage Hux. She never directly interacts with Snoke.
Yeah, it's really just Finn. We see that relationship. So my question is, do you go back and say, they should have included these bits in the films, or do you put her in The Rise of Skywalker and give her something to do? Does she show up on Exegol in now she has a red stripe down her helmet, or now her arm is blue or something, where she's working directly for the power? Or is she the spy?
Yeah, so that was going to be my next point is the Phasma as written and as portrayed in the ancillary materials is not going to ever hitch her ride to a sinking ship. She is going to be the rat jumping off the sinking ship the first chance she gets. She's done it before several times. So
instead of making Hux the mole,
which wasn't done well anyway. So Phasma's character in The Force Awakens, while she needed more interaction with the other villainous characters to truly be established, was fine. The interaction with Finn was great, but then even the implication of, at first she appears like she's weak when she gives out the codes, but if we establish that because she doesn't actually care if Starkiller Base gets destroyed, and if we maybe hint at that, it's compelling. But we never get that. Because then by the time we get to The Last Jedi, she's calling Finn resistant scum, when really she doesn't have any ideological bone in this argument, as portrayed in the ancillary material. She just sees the First Order as her best way of maintaining a power base and having escaped her origin. So I think she resents Finn for having broken out from under her command, but I think they need to make the relationship between them more personal. I think there need to be more scenes between Finn and Phasma, and as we get to the Finn section, it would have been more poignant if Finn was developing Force-sensitive powers at this point.
I was going to say, if we look at the development of Phasma, not just her, but her and Finn, we can almost... I was thinking about this before, of what do you do with Finn in The Rise of Skywalker? Because he's a lackey. He has no agency. He has no goal. So I say, yes, you definitely lean heavily on his Force sensitivity, but you also give him this... they had the notion of this, but I think they could do more of a Stormtrooper rebellion. He meets Janna. I believe her name is Janna.
The woman who leads the exiled Stormtroopers on the planet that the Death Star crashed on, right?
Yeah, it's a vague... amplify that more. Have Phasma and Finn work together in order to incite a clone trooper rebellion.
Stormtrooper,
yeah.
But I think going back to how it improved Phasma in The Last Jedi, I would have her be the one that kills Paige. Because Paige is Rose's sister who dies. So I would have... Because you need her to be doing more things. And there's already a character who's dying. You could say, oh, it was the senseless thing of war, and this is actually put it on Poe. But have Poe give the order for her to move, and then have Phasma's ship be the one that shoots her down.
Sure.
Phasma's not going to be manning a turbo laser herself.
She's giving the order.
Yeah, and have Rose blame... It's like, oh, that's Phasma's ship, and then Phasma blows it out of the sky. Let's have Rose have a personal stake to be going after. When they're captured by Phasma, there's some instant tension there, and why Rose would also want to be helping kill Phasma. She's the person who would try to indoctrinate Finn, person who killed Paige, and then, I would certainly leave her alive because we needed a more recognizable villain in The Rise of Skywalker because you've killed Snoke.
Yeah.
Armitage Hux is made into a joke to introduce these new general characters.
Pride, I think. General Pride.
Yeah, who I think, is mentioned before, but it's not great.
And he's menacing, but imagine you had Hux live, and you have this little fascist dweeb finally get what he wants, and now he has to answer to this ghostly marionette of Palpatine, and he's just in over his head, and maybe that leads to just the poor leadership of the First Order. But he didn't need to be the rat. That's...
Yeah,
sniveling.
Phasma would have made a great rat, not because for moral reasons, where you often see it's like, oh, it's turned to good. I want her to make the cold-blooded, like, I want credits, and you give me a ship, and I will give you the access codes. Yeah. And I want I want a moment between Finn and Phasma, where he asks her, like, why she does it.
And she's not going to give him a straight answer, because she doesn't tell anybody about herself.
But she can see that he's already gone through the character development from The Last Jedi, where he's now been ideologically committed, and she lost to him, but she might warn him. He's like, causes aren't worth anything. You always got to look out for yourself. This last moment of respect, or at least trying, seeing the path she's gone down and trying to warn him against being so committed to this ideology that's going to spin him up and throw him out. And then I want her to leave. I want her to successfully betray her leaders, give them the codes maybe to access whatever the tower thing they needed, take her ship and go, and then vanish from the story as this realizing, because it's also continuing the theme of the story of critiquing fascism, which it does, and I enjoy. When fascists start to fall, all of their followers immediately leave and betray them, and so that's why it's a bad leadership style. So I want to say Phasma would have been a great example to show the weakness of this top-down, we just rule by fear, but then we start losing, because then I would want Phasma, when she realizes that there's a real chance they'll lose, to betray them and leave in exchange for the resource she needs to set herself off somewhere else.
Would she have a Millennium Falcon moment where she flies back?
Oh, fuck no.
For the win?
No.
Yeah. It doesn't fall in line with her character.
Not unless there was something in it for Phasma.
Yeah. His parallel of DJ, who's this, not my favorite character from The Last Jedi, but also has that sensibility of you have to look out for yourself. And she's doing the same thing, but it could be this, moment of karma in the characters' lives where they were once betrayed. Now it's because of betrayal in the First Order that's going to allow them the keys to victory. Phasma
is basically the scorpion and still the scorpion and the toad, where the scorpion climbs the back of the toad. She is always going to betray the person she's serving. She has done it several times before. I mean, she's already betrayed the First Order. They didn't even know it. She's already betrayed them. She just she decided that staying was better than leaving.
It's more profitable for her.
Yeah. So I wanted it. So that would be what I do with Phasma is you need to expand her dynamic.
Maybe she'll kill Paige. Maybe she'll kill someone else. But she really needs to be a true nemesis to Finn.
Yeah. Rey and Kylo are fulfilling that whole dynamic. They don't need, other than Palpatine, they don't need another nemesis. And then Poe's nemesis is really Hux.
Yeah. And it gets rid of Pride because, again, intimidating character, but not a useful character.
He can be there, kind of like Admiral Piet, but he doesn't need to just be, the fact that he shot Hux and they made Hux into a joke.
Yeah.
Fascism is a joke, but Hux, you're supposed to be because he's a fascist, not because he's a joke.
Yeah, The Last Jedi is not a perfect movie. I talked about fan edits, and one of the more successful ones is a fan edit of that movie where it just gets rid of that line and a couple cleavage aliens, and it cleans up the experience.
The cleavage aliens from Canto Bight?
Yeah.
Well, at least Canto Bight is... Okay, we'll talk about Canto Bight in another episode. They released 4 novels set in Canto Bight before that novel.
Yeah, trying to salvage.
And it was like this horrifying dystopian Las Vegas, Wild West, capitalist utopia.
Which sounds awesome.
No, it sounds awful. It's awful. Most of the characters are chewed up and spit out by the city.
It's an awful environment, but I would watch a show.
Oh, yeah.
It reminded me, if anyone's familiar with the city of New Crabazon, as described in China Mieville's Perdido Street Station.
Where it's just this great metropolis of money and capital that just draws people in with its glitz and its glamour and then spits them out or uses them up or kills them.
You're telling me you wouldn't want to see a show with Cad Bane and Hondo Onaga on Canto Bight?
I would love that, but again...
Casino Royale style.
But what was done with Canto Bight instead was... I mean, it was used to make a critique of war profiteering, which is a fine point to make, and of animal abuse, which is a fine point to make, but it had the subtlety of a sledgehammer.
Right.
And the subtlety of a sledgehammer on fire that had a police siren attached to it. And then it had the character state the moral. while it was happening.
That's not the fault of Rose Tico or the actress, but it's the writing.
No, I do not blame the character of Rose Tico. In fact, I
Yeah.
enjoy the character of Rose Tico probably more than most people. I think that Finn needed someone to contrast, whereas Finn is brave but does not have a cause, and Rose is not very brave but has a cause.
And that, like I always say, why don't you just make Poe Dameron Rose Tico and just get rid of Rose Tico? But it's a very different character dynamic.
Well, because then you have to change Poe's arc in The Last Jedi, because Poe is currently going through a crisis of command where he feels like he has to be the only one who solves everything. We're getting a little far afield. So I think we talked about the Phasma character arc and how I would fix her, but I would agree that it's a missed opportunity in the way, maybe not even talking how to fix it, but just identifying the missed opportunity. They set up this scorpion-like character who is very compelling and very evil, a believable villain, and then they didn't allude to her backstory enough. I mean, even Boba Fett, we don't know anything about him other than he has a cool ship. Vader respects him, and he's wearing cool armor.
Yeah.
And his backstory, of course, made that cooler. But the weakness with Phasma, you can't go that approach because she doesn't interact with the other villains enough to be given the same respect, and she's within the power structure. So she needed, and she has this dynamic only with Finn. She has like 3 scenes that she's in. So they had this really cool character who is perfectly believable to betray them and to portray the weakness of a fascist regime. Like, and you got to remember, the First Order is not the same as the Empire, where it's this great bureaucratic grinding thing. It is a personality-driven junta. So it's a very different dynamic. Palpatine never stood on a stage before the Empire, or Tarkin never went up on a stage and gave a great speech before using the Death Star.
It's all
depersonalized.
Yeah, brought from them to the Senate to just trickle down. It's the First Order is definitely this Empire to the nth degree. It is all of the animosity. It's the invading force. They don't have a base of operations. They have a giant fucking ship called the Supremacy, and that's just where their home base is. I don't know if it's their home base. I know it's their capital ship, but that's all we see as far as that is their seat of power.
Yeah, and I think I want to linger on this point a little bit more, and I think this is key to understanding the difference in the power structures and how the villains needed to be constructed in the sequel trilogy, and the difference between the Empire, which was was the evils of a great bureaucracy, growing out of an era in the Cold War, where horrible things could be done and many people could be killed in a depersonalized way. It's like you just kill all the people in Alderaan, don't even think of them as people. Whereas the way it's portrayed as this junta in The Force Awakens is you have to reinforce that these people are the other. It's the enemy. It's this post-Cold War now, post-colonial world when it was produced in, where the way in which you incite people to violence is not through established power structures, but through making them the other and making it's not that you don't care about them, it's that you dislike them and hate them. They need to be the subjects of scorn and the other. So it talks about the weakness of the New Republic and how they have failed and how they deserve this. Whereas Tarkin didn't make a speech about how Alderaan needed to be destroyed. He gave an order and his bureaucracy carried it out.
Because they are the power. They are the system. They don't need to rally against anyone because they are the power structure, where the First Order is trying to topple the power structure.
And then they do become that power structure and immediately fragment.
Yeah. Which could have been shown
through the character of Phasma.
But imagine if you have, this is going to be a multi-part series, but if you have this absentee Supreme Leader in Kylo Ren, who's going off and trying to pursue his own dark side path, and then you have the 2 figureheads of Phasma and Hux, where Hux is this feeble...
I don't think he's feeble. I think he's a coward at heart.
Yeah.
But he is charismatic. I think that was what they missed after The Force Awakens, is that he was this effective, charismatic person. He was able to motivate people. He was able to get things done. He successfully built and deployed Starkiller Base, and he killed a ton of people. I mean, if you're going to measure effectiveness of fascist rulers,
his ambition might outreach his ability.
Certainly.
Yeah. But having him and Phasma, who is a solo agent who is, looking at the wallpaper peel and just ready to jump ship into another...
Well, and knows that Hux knows that she killed his father. So she'll be looking for any excuse to kill Hux, to Armitage Hux. So that would have been a good end for him, was either she giving the codes to or helping Poe Dameron kill Armitage Hux. And then maybe Poe tries to, maybe she'll, and then she never comes back. So I think that covers what I would change about Phasma's character, or at least where the missed opportunities were. In that, I think it was a fundamental weakness in how the antagonists were portrayed in the sequel trilogy, and that they were too fragmented with no clear vision, and was just constantly, except for Kylo Ren, who was the only really truly compelling villain and consistent villain antagonist in the sequel trilogy.
We've been talking Star Wars. We'll see you sometime soon in a galaxy right here.